Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast. This is Bruce Hutchin, host and executive producer. Each week you will hear tips, techniques, strategies, and personal stories from some of the best and funniest whitetail hunters in North America. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you do, tell a friend on social media. If not, tell me and I'll make it better. Thanks for listening, folks. Hey, folks, we're heading out to Nebraska today, and we're going to meet up with Eric Dinger. Now, Eric is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Powderhook. What's all about Powderhook? Well, a lot of us are looking for a place to hunt in various states. A lot of us want to go fishing in various states. And a lot of us want to find out how I can build a community online with people with like-minded that are going to give me some insights to where I want to hunt and fish. Well, throw that all together, and Eric Dinger has put that together in a digital format in an app called Powderhook. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, this is Bruce Hutchin, your host and executive producer of Whitetail Rendezvous. I'm with Eric Dinger, and Eric's with Powderhook. And Powderhook is a nerdy technology company made up a whole bunch of outdoor guys. I don't know how that works, but Eric's sure going to tell us about that. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bruce. Glad to be here.
So come on, help me out here. You know, we were just talking about some people that know technology way above my pay grade. And so, what do you do there at Powderhook?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, first of all. And here goes. Powderhook is all about using technology to get people into the outdoors. That sounds a little counterintuitive because most outdoorsmen are trying to figure out how to get people off of technology. But almost everybody listening to this show probably has a cell phone. Every person under the age of 30 that I've ever been around uses their cell phone for just about everything. And so what we're trying to do is build some technology in the form of an app that's designed to help people find where to go, what to do outdoors, learn from other people, and find mentors who can kind of help them along the way. So the net of our work is we're trying to get more people out deer hunting, more people out waterfowl hunting, help them have better days when they go and kind of turn around this national trend of declining participation in the outdoors.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to Brian Murphy this morning from QDMA, and it's his 20th anniversary at QDMA. So, hey, Brian, some more shout outs to you, and heck of a job. But he said 2.x million people forget about hunting, last year. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, we're down from 13.9 million 5 years ago to 10.5 million licensed buyers in this country this last year. So, and even worse over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, the number was about 18.3 million. So that's almost an $8 million or million person fall off of licensed buyers in this country. That's something that, if you're listening to this show and you're a hunter, obviously, maybe that's a good thing in your mind. Maybe that's fewer people in the deer woods for you. But we got to remember that hunters shoot guns. We need to be politically relevant as gun owners. And for those of you listeners who are aware of how conservation works in this country, the license purchases and the purchases of guns and bows and ammo all contribute to how fish and wildlife are managed in this country. And if those numbers continue to go down at the current rate, we're going to be looking at a pretty scary scenario for how conservation is funded in this country.
Yeah, and Eric's talking about Pittman Robinson money, and it's a big pot. So all that money, sales taxes and everything goes into a pot, and then it's delegated out to each state agency. And the fewer people that are putting money into the pot, the less money the agencies have to do their work. It's pretty
That's
simple.
right. You got it, Bruce. Yeah. And why does that matter to me as a deer hunter? Well, if you enjoy hunting state ground, if you like there to be game management in areas that you might potentially hunt, if you want EHD research and CWD research, if you care about the health of your deer herd, those deer don't have a political say. Those deer don't have a way to make money and fund their habitat. It's the deer hunters who are paying for tags and paying for gear that are basically the only thing between those deer and their habitat becoming a strip mall. And I don't think any of us want to see that happen.
No. And I had a couple of my friends, they started something just locally, and each of them have gone out and said, okay, I'm going to find some young kid. I'm going to find some, you know, male or female, doesn't matter, or somebody that I know at work or anything, and just take them out. Forget about hunting. Just take them out in the outdoors. Go for a hike. Um, Go and watch somebody shoot skeet. It doesn't really matter, but just take them out of their natural element and get them in there, because a lot of people, I found, they just nobody mentored
Right.
them at all.
Bruce, I think that's the key insight to all of our work here at Powderhook is, sometimes I'll travel around the country and I'll give a talk, and maybe there's 100 people in the room. And if you ask 100 hunters how they became hunters, 99 of them are going to tell you that somebody helped them, somebody showed them, somebody mentored them. And what's happening is, as the amount of hunters decline, the amount of people available to mentor is also declining. So what we've built at Powderhook is a different take on the age-old problem of finding a mentor, in that we've created what we call a digital mentor in Powderhook. And that's never going to replace, you, Bruce, taking out your neighbor kid. It's not designed to do that. But what we can do is we can help your neighbor kid when you're not available. And again, not designed to be something that stands in the way of anything mentoring wise, but we need millions of mentors. And the mentoring programs we know of in the United States have thousands of mentors. That's a pretty big gap. And it's actually, I believe, the reason we're seeing the hunter numbers decline the way we are is, yes, access is hard. Yes, urbanization is affecting things. Yes, licenses can be complicated. But ultimately, it comes down to hunters and anglers aren't taking people the way they used to.
No, and I think, way back when I was 10 years old, it wasn't my father, it was my neighbor who took me hunting
Right.
and fishing.
He was your
That
mentor.
was it. He was a mentor, and that, you know, back those days, a lot of people hunted. I mean, or fished or did all that stuff. It was just part of the lifestyle. But I just remember that, and I'm thankful for Otto Knight, who took me hunting and fishing. Without that, I don't know if I'd have this show today. I probably would have,
Right.
because I would have met somebody else along the line. Um, but you just think about that, listeners, and it's really up to you. So, Eric, if they're interested in finding out more about your application, how would they do that?
Yeah. So the best way to do it is just to go to your App Store or Google Play and search Powderhook. And Powderhook is like gunpowder fish hook, all one word. Powderhook, all one word. So if you search that in the App Store or Google Play, you'll find it. Otherwise, just go to powderhook.com, and the links are right there for you to download it. It's a free app. We actually make our money by working with businesses, and the businesses use our tools to actually become mentors and have their employees be mentors in our system. So it's a tool purpose built to change this problem of declining participation in the outdoors. So I hope you guys will check it out.
Now, how long have you been up and running?
Company's been around for just over 4 years now. Our app has been live for about a year. We at one time we were trying to change the way people access private ground, because access is a really tough challenge for a lot of people, including me. Not having a place to go prevents somebody from going, right? And so when we first started, we were trying to basically build the VRBO, or the Airbnb of the outdoors, where people could pay for access by day to a private land lease, basically. So instead of leasing land by the year, we were trying to work with landowners to show them how they could actually get more people more access by leasing it by the day versus by the year. But that business model failed miserably. So for the last year, we've been working on this app angle and the digital mentoring approach we're taking now. The thought being, we weren't able to get landowners to work directly with hunters through our technology, so maybe we can have hunters help hunters.
And I'm thinking, how many people do you have that have the app right now? And what's your forecast for growth?
Today, we have about 125,000 users. Roughly 30,000 of those have the app. We'd like to see that number double here before the end of the year. So we got a busy fall ahead of us.
Yeah, no, 100 and some thousand. Help me out understand. You said about 100,000 are using the app, and
We have what we call a registered user, is somebody who's used our apps or our website, and we have
okay.
125,000 of those. And then of those, 30,000 have used the Powderhook app.
Okay. So we're talking about conversion rates from those 100,000 that have touched your company somehow to actually we're on their phone, they have the app. Is that correct?
Yep, you got it. Yep,
Okay.
exactly right.
All right. So folks, again, Eric, tell them how they can get the app.
Yeah, you just hit powderhook.com on your phone. So go www.powderhook.com, or you can open App Store or Google Play, search Powderhook, all one word, Powderhook, and it's a free download right there. Always be free.
And that's great. And we're going to stay on the technology bent because Eric is, I'd say, a good friend of QDMA, and he utilizes the QDMA tracker. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, we partnered with the crew at QDMA to build them an app before we built our own app, actually. And that app is called Deer Tracker. Something your guys might be really interested in is what Deer Tracker does is it monitors, well, it allows users to create reports so hunters can kind of track what they're seeing in the field, create a diary of sorts. When you saw a scrape, when you saw a deer, when you shot a deer, you can create a what we call a harvest report and actually score your deer, weigh your deer, all kinds of cool stuff through the technology. But what we're actually working on there is because that's kind of a crowdsourced tool, we build a heat map out of that data. And we provide that data to the biologists or any of the data in the app to the biologists at QDMA so that they can use that to make decisions that they think are important. But what the app does is it builds a heat map where the map heats up based on users' reports of daytime mature deer sightings. So a lot of time as hunters, we've heard that hunting the rut is the most important part of the season. Well, the biologists at QDMA say the peak of the rut is actually a terrible time to deer hunt because deer are all locked down. But that seeking and chasing phase before and after the peak of the rut is actually the time that you really want to be out. And so what the app does is it heats up like a thunderstorm map. It gets redder and redder the closer you are to that seeking and chasing period in your area.
And that's through actual observations. I'm thinking people
Yeah, that's
observing
through
more
human
deer,
generated data.
right? And then they, once they input it, it gets uploaded. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. So the logic is this that if you think about the best time to see a mature deer most of the year is right before sundown or sunrise. Right after sunrise and right before sundown. But during that seeking and chasing period for a couple weeks before and after the peak of the rut, you're likely to see a mature deer move at different parts of the day. So what the app does is it says the further you get from sunrise and sunset, when you see a mature deer, the more likely that seeking and chasing period is on. Does that make sense?
Understood. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Now let's just define in your mind a mature deer. What does that look like, or what is it?
Yeah, good question. So, we went back and forth a lot with QDMA about this because one of the perceptions that QDMA struggles with is, quality deer management is all about rich guys growing big deer for themselves. It's all about antler size. And what QDM is truly about and what their organization stands for is they want to see a healthy deer herd. And the best indicator of a healthy deer herd is how many deer make it to a mature age. So in their world, they're much less concerned with antler growth and overall deer size. What they're looking for is, can we get a good percentage of our herd to 5.5 years old? That's what quality deer management is in the eyes of Quality Deer Management Association. Now, yes, it can be said that in order to have a big effect on that, you have to manage your property. That could be true, but it's also true that we can be in some cases more selective about which animals we harvest. And I'm by no means here to say which deer you should or shouldn't shoot. I'm actually quite the opposite of that. I think if it's the deer you want to shoot and you're legal to shoot it, you should shoot it. But I think on the whole, an education can happen and is important in this space for what does it take to grow a healthy deer herd? Why is it important that we're seeing deer mature to the upper ages of their total life expectancy? And why should that matter when we pull the trigger? Well, to some people it doesn't, and I think that's just fine. But to those people that want to participate in the QDM sort of ideology or thought process, you're probably going to want to let the 3.5-year-old deer pass early in the season.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking, the farms that I hunt, and we've seen a dramatic increase since we invoked some of the QDMA, precepts, and taking the different age classes. Now the 1.5-year-old, pretty much, unless the kids are going to shoot them, are living to 2.5, and then we've had some bucks. I killed a 135 3.5-year-old deer, and what would it have been if I let him go? Well, my buddy killed
Yeah.
his dad, and he was 160. So, and
Yeah.
4.5 years old, just another year. But you think about all that, listeners, and what you want to do, and I like how Eric said it. If that's the deer you want to shoot, shoot it. I don't. It doesn't matter, because you have every single right, and no matter what they say on social media or whatever, that's your deer, and so you're going to celebrate, that deer, and that's good. In the meantime, you want to have age class recruitment up to the 4.5, 5.5-year old. And, once you hit that, then your gene pool is strong. All those uh, things that happen when you have a good selected breeding opportunities for these bucks, and they'll fight and they'll mix it up, but you'll get good breeding on a high number of does, in my opinion. And we've seen that on our farm.
Yeah, ultimately, I think you said it well. It comes down to the user's choice, right? That if I'm pulling the trigger and that's the deer I want to shoot, I'm going to do it. And I'll give you a really good story about that. So we were hunting my wife and I. My wife has just gotten into deer hunting. She's shot a buck 2 years in a row now, but she's brand new at it. I'm sorry, she shot a buck 2 years ago, button buck, on her uncle's property. And then last year we were out. We hunted hard, most of the days of the season, and we just never had a deer that the landowner whose property we were hunting never had a deer they were comfortable with taking. They wanted us to take a 3.5 and up deer. But my wife has never shot anything with antlers. She shot a button buck, and then last year ended up shooting a doe. And we had a 2.5-year-old, fork, tiny really by any, quote, trophy hunters standards. He was playing in front of us for 15 minutes, and she was shaking so bad. She was so excited. And that deer could just as well have been a 205-inch typical 4x4. Like that was the deer of a lifetime to her. And I regret being in a position where she couldn't shoot. I don't regret not shooting it because the landowner asked us not to. And that's his absolute prerogative. It's his land. But that deer couldn't have been any bigger in her mind. And I miss that she didn't get to experience that feeling of pulling the trigger and killing her first antlered deer. Um, Knowing that, that would have been the trophy of a lifetime to date for her. Maybe not the biggest deer she'll ever shoot, but that's a big deer to her. And that would have been really fun. So all of that goes to say that it's doer's choice. And I think anybody that'll judge you for the size of deer you shoot is hunting for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and we see it, and we'll see it this fall. Some guy goes, "You can't believe this buck!" It just like your wife. Maybe it's the first, branch antlered deer he's ever shot. He's just proud as anything, and somebody can buy and slam. What'd you kill that little deer for? Type of stuff, and it happens. And so, listeners, don't be that guy. Don't be that gal. Celebrate somebody's success and somebody's joy. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, amen. If you're a QDM guy, do your thing. By all means, just remember, not everybody thinks the same way. And I'll tell you this: I didn't shoot a buck last year. I shot a doe, and my wife shot a doe. And the doe that my wife shot was probably 2.5, and the tenderloins on that thing were about as good as any meat I've ever had in my life. So, and that button buck the year before, I tell everybody that'll listen, we cooked the tenderloins of that button buck. There were probably a total of a pound of tenderloin on that deer. But I sliced those at an angle. We salt and peppered and garliced them and put them on as hot of a cast iron skillet as we could get it for about 30 seconds aside in olive oil. And I served those to my family at Thanksgiving. And I don't know if I've ever had a better bite of meat in my life. So I'm here to tell you that if what you're looking for is feeding your family, do what you want to do. What you're looking for is shooting the biggest deer you've ever seen in your life, do that. Just, you don't have to have an opinion on somebody else's deal unless they're asking for it.
Yeah, well said. And, in the warm up, we talked about your hunting tradition. So let's spin out to the Dakotas and the number one pheasant capital of the world, and hunting a little bit. Not all the stories about your granddad, but
Yeah,
a
we'll leave some of
couple.
those out. I'll bet your granddad was probably no different.
Oh, my uncle. It was my uncle Henry. I never knew my grandfather, but anyway,
Okay.
leave that
Yeah.
alone. But Uncle Henry
Everybody
would.
has an Uncle Henry.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
So
so
let's
I
share
grew
some
up
of those.
in I grew up in a little town called Redfield, South Dakota, and the little trailer house I grew up in was about 200 yards from the sign that said "Pheasant Capital of the World." So, Dad managed the grain elevator, and a lot of family in the area. So, I don't ever remember a time where we weren't hunting growing up. It was either sports or hunting, fishing in the spring, fall, or in the summer. And it was an awesome way to grow up. I think I guided my first hunters when I was maybe 9 or 10. And my sister and I had a pheasant cleaning business when I was probably 12, 13, 14. Just an awesome way to grow up. But what it did is it completely spoiled me. I felt like shooting a limit of pheasants was a birthright. And in that area, it kind of is. But then as I've moved around the country, moved to Minnesota for high school and down to Nebraska to go to college, I've quickly realized that not everybody gets that opportunity, and that isn't evenly distributed across all people that would like to have that opportunity. That's for sure. Didn't hunt deer a lot growing up. I have a baby picture holding the rack of a deer my dad shot, but deer hunting was always second to bird hunting, waterfowl and pheasants growing up. But when I moved to Nebraska, the pheasant population isn't like what it's like back home, and so over the last 20 years or so, I've really picked up the turkey and deer hunting here a bunch, and have really gotten the deer hunting bug pretty bad actually since my little kids are starting to get to the point where they like to go, and we've got this cool little blind that a friend of ours lets us sit in where all four of us can be up in the blind at the same time. And so last year was the first year we really did that, and what gives me passion for it this year and what I'm really excited for going forward is to have those two along with my wife. My wife is always the first shooter, but it's just a really neat kind of a family time to have 4 or 5 hours at a time where you're not looking at your stupid phone or you're not looking at, TV, and we're just sitting there being a family. That's pretty fun now. And that's a completely different experience than what I've had as a guy growing up hunting kind of for myself. So it's been really fun to get the kids going. It's been really fun to get my wife into it. And I'm looking forward to a lot more of that this fall.
Great. Let's talk about whitetails. I know you got a couple mounts on the wall there. One's, a little bit bigger than the other, but who cares? As we said, but
Yeah.
let's talk about your whitetail experience. Are you an archer or rifleman, muzzleloader?
Yeah, I've never shot one with a muzzle loader. Loved archery and rifle hunt. Probably hunted with a rifle more than anything. Didn't grow up archery hunting, and in fact, maybe only 10 years ago took it up at all. And for the most part, I've actually archery turkey hunted a lot, which some of your listeners may have done. That's probably not the way a lot of people would prefer it, but the turkeys where we live in Nebraska aren't real educated, so you can get them pretty close, and so we've been bow hunting turkeys a lot lately. On the whitetail front, I'm probably not as avid as some guys. I probably am out and sit 10 to 15 days. Um, I'm by no means a trophy hunter. I actually, on the last day for the last several years, have shot a doe just because I love deer meat. And so, really, the last few years has been about getting my wife going, helping other people kind of get their deer. But I'll tell you one great story. I was hunting a property south of Lincoln, Nebraska, a couple years back, and it was opening morning, and it was just getting to light, and I had what I thought was an absolute giant cross about 100 yards through the cedars in front of me. Super excited about it. He was big, body was big, looked big. So you get the shakes, you get ready to shoot, and he popped between the next row of cedars and a shot, and walked up and found him laying there. And he had the classic ground shrinkage. He probably wasn't a very big deer. He was 3.5 is all, but he just was a huge deer, big body. And you go through all the joy and excitement and the shakes, and then you realize, man, that wasn't the deer I thought it was, and you kind of balance a little bit of disappointment because you thought maybe it was a little bigger. So anyway, we got the deer out, we get all done. My dad was with, and I sent him back down to the end of the shelter belt we were hunting, and I walked to the pond that was between all of this, basically to wash my knife off and clean my hands off. And swimming across the pond away from us was the biggest whitetail I've ever seen in my life. It looked like the Miami Hurricanes U. He was
Oh my goodness.
tall, big, wide, old, and he was going he was bleeding every time he breathed across the pond. So he swam all the way. It had to have been 250 yards across the pond. He gets out, shakes off, and looks at me, and I can still see this deer. If I shut my eyes, I can still see him. Imagine the Miami Hurricanes helmet, the U on their helmet, on a gray, old, saggy bellied whitetail. Stand up, get out of the water, and stare at you like, what are you going to do? We spent the next 2 days walking back and forth in that shelter belt trying to figure out how to push him to my dad, which obviously isn't the way that you want to hunt a big deer like that, but it was the only option because we didn't have access on the other side of the property. So if he was still in our property, we were doing the right thing, but he slipped us and we never saw him again. So I'll
Let me
never
ask you a
forget though
question.
that
An-
ah, ah.
Do you think he was running with the deer that you shot, and you saw him, and then he disappeared, and out came this other deer, and he just kept on trucking?
That could be. I hadn't thought of that, but he was right by where we shot that, or I shot that other deer. That could be actually. I never thought of that. That might be the case. What I thought was just so fascinating is that my dad was on the would have been the south end of the shelter belt. He walked towards me, towards where I shot, and clearly that deer got between the two of us. And rather than expose himself, he jumped in the water and swam. I just think that's fascinating, like the survival instinct of an animal like that to be so smart to know not to cross either of us and to slip us and hop in the water and swim away. And I guess he wasn't that smart because had I still had a tag, he'd have been in
Yeah,
trouble. But
yeah,
uh, he, yeah, I had him in my scope too. It was, and my dad chewed my butt for not shooting him, but he can't, and so didn't. And but I can still see it, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can imagine that one. There's always that one that got away, but he was dead to rights at a strong rest at 250 yards, and he was standing right there. And I just, you just don't shoot. Dad still
yeah.
had a tag, and so I don't know. That's too long of a story, probably, but I
No, that's a
imagine a lot of
great
your
story.
listeners have that. A lot of your listeners have that deer in their head too. I'm sure, where it's like, shut your eyes, you can literally see this deer still. God, he was whitish gray. I still haven't seen a deer that big on the hoof since.
Because they're hard to see. And I tell
Yeah,
people all the time, I don't care if you got 40 acres, 80 acres, 100 acres, whatever, but there is a deer that you would just go, no way is he in my property, because you don't have him on a trail cam for whatever reason, and
yeah,
you just never put eyes on him, but he's there. I
yeah.
firmly believe that. Talking to the thousands of people I have, there's too many stories. That's what I mentioned to you. Did you get double team, and he picked up that little buck moving
Put
the
the
same
slip on.
way, and then
He is
flipped
a
you that
crafty old
way?
bastard. He's a
Well,
crafty
yeah,
old bastard if that's what he did. Yeah.
well,
Around
yeah,
here, I think a lot of the deer are in the corn until mid November, even sometimes after the rifle season, just because corn's such great cover for them that not until after all the corn's out do they make their way into the shelter belts and stuff. In some cases, so at least
right,
down there where we
yeah.
were hunting, it was all surrounded by corn. So who knows where he ended up?
Yeah, and it's hard to sneak up on a buck in the corn. I mean,
Yeah.
it just really is hard to do unless the wind's up, and
Yep.
everything's going right, and you know where he is. But because they can hide, or they can just circle you and make you look stupid, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because they just can circle you and keep
They're so
circling you.
adapted. Yeah.
Yep, because they know. I mean, they know we're here. We're there.
Uh huh.
There's no question about it. They're smarter than I am. That's for darn sure.
And this one was better looking than both of us.
He aged really well.
Yeah.
Well, we're sitting here yucking it up. What's your one big thing about hunting? That you want
You
to
know,
share with the listeners.
eh, big thing would be I talk about this stuff all day, every day, and for any of your listeners that have ever heard me or seen me talk, you know that I'm all about getting new people going. It's what our work is about. I don't think it has to be a kid; it can be a kid. But man, I think once you start teaching new people, it gets in your blood in a different way than hunting for yourself does. It's not necessarily more or less fun. It's just a different kind of experience. And I've gotten to where I get as much satisfaction out of taking somebody new. I had a buddy shoot his first pheasant with us last year on a trip back home to South Dakota. And I mean, it's just so much cooler than me shooting another pheasant. So, my big thing now is I got a lot of things on my bucket list I haven't touched. Shot an elk last year for the first time. That was a great one with my dad. But man, when it comes to the day-to-day hunting around home, I've started to get to where I really like seeing my kids see it. I really love it when my wife has success. That's really fun. She shot a grand slam actually, turkey wise. It's been fun to just see and help get other people going. And so I would encourage your listeners that, if you've shot a few deer in your life, ask a neighbor. Again, it doesn't have to be a kid. And in fact, the data says if it's not a kid, there's a lot better chance they can keep going because that person probably has the means to get to their stand and the means to find a rifle and to go range or go shoot at the range and things. Ask somebody new and like you said at first, Bruce, even if they don't shoot, take them along and share with them the experience of watching the sunrise from a tree stand. I think that's pretty tough to beat.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm just thinking, this past fall, I spent 4 or 5 days in the mountains with some friends. And there was a guy from Illinois, 48, 50 years old, never hunted elk before. We were hunting archery. And so because everybody else was kind of paired up and they were 20 years younger, 40 years younger than I am. And so they said, "Hey, would you mind taking Ron with you?" I go, "Heck no." So he and I spent 5 days, covered over 20 miles above 10,000 feet. And it's just, did we see some elk? Yeah. One evening we saw some, no shots. And I told him at the beginning, I said, "The first shot's yours, just don't miss." He laughed.
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure. He laughed at that. But we saw some sites in the Colorado Rockies that I said, and I looked at him one time and I said, "You're the first and only person that's been exactly the same spot and be able to see the back of Maroon Bells and Snowmass, blah, 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 all those mountain ranges." And he just looks and he just like, forget the hunting. I mean, just to be there over 10,000 feet and looking out at this panorama mountain range. And it's like, to me, it's life changing. I mean, I never
Yeah,
get that never gets tired. And that's what I
church.
meant by just taking a guy. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's big time church. And I'm closer to God when I'm at 11,000, 12,000 feet or on a horse riding in the moon. I call it clicking trail in the moonlight. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm here. I'm living a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes it possible.
That's right. I agree with
Pretty
that.
much, pretty much. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me this podcast going because just interesting people like yourself. But then the experiences that people share, and that's the hunting tradition to me is those experiences.
Yep. It's always the experience. And I think another thing, if you want to talk hot buttons about hunting is our team has actually just this year really done a good job of trying to relay the message that a hunt is not about the kill. And it absolutely includes the kill, absolutely is about the kill to a degree, but the hunt is about the animal, it's about the place, it's about the people you're with. And there's so much more to share than a grip and grin photo about what it means to be a hunter. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice as a hunting community in general by sharing the big bloody dead moose and not any of the camaraderie, not the prop, float plane we got up there on and the unbelievable beauty of, Alaska or heck, a cornfield for that matter in South Dakota. We forget that it's those deeper experiences that are the reason we love it. And when we communicate about it, I think it's important that we consider sharing some of the rest of that stuff.
I I agree 100%. While we were talking, I was just thinking some of the sunrises I've been able to see, and it's just sometimes I have to pinch myself. How the heck did I ever get here?
Yeah.
You know,
Bruce, I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's not a big city by any means. 300,000 people. There's plenty of people here. I forget. I don't get to see the sun come up, and I don't get to see the sun come down. I live in town. Trees all over the place in my neighborhood. I don't see it. So unless I'm intentional about it, I don't ever see the sunrise and sunset, and I forget how beautiful that is. And I think a lot of your listeners probably live in urban areas as well, and I don't think you can take for granted how beautiful that is and how important it is to take other people out there to see that, because I think we lose sight of a lot of things when we don't realize how big this world is and how, how much we are ultimately just an animal, and that we need the time to be away and the time to experience those places and those things. And seeing the sun come up is a great reminder of how seldom we get to do that, because people like me live in cities.
Yeah, and I look forward to spending some time in some ridges in Wisconsin where I'll be, in some of my old stands and some of the new stands we have. But I'm fortunate there because we're high enough so the sun comes up, the sun goes down, and if I do an all day sit, I see the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And not a lot
That's
of people
pretty.
get to do that, Bruce.
No, yeah, like I said, it's incredible the things I've been able to enjoy and share, and people I travel with, and campfires we set around, and
You know, your tone is reminding me of a thought I have for your listeners. My wife and I were in Chicago last December to Christmas shop, and that whole city had its panties in a wad. There were Black Lives Matters marches going, and all the clerks at the stores were all tired and worn out and frustrated. And I got to thinking, the exact opposite of that is how you feel when you're hunting. And it was sort of like I left Chicago with this wish for others to just have a chance to go sit in a tree stand. Just go sit at the end of a cornfield and shut up for 5 hours and just be still. And I can't imagine what would happen in our world if more people got a chance to have just the chance to be away and still. And it excites me to be working on getting more people to experience that, because I think it can really help, and not just help hunting, but just help humans find their sense of place and understand that there's a lot more at play here in this world than their lives.
and that's hard to do. I mean, it's just hard to do for people that some people said, well, you got to get unplugged, you got to do this, you got to do this, and you can read 1,000 books and you know or blogs, and people say, here's how to become a better you. And both both you and I agree or know that. And I love how you just said it. It's real simple. Just do the simple thing. Just go and sit someplace and see what happens for the
Just
whole
be
day.
still.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think as deer hunters, we sometimes take for granted what that does to our mindset. I never have better clarity as a person than when I'm in that environment.
yeah. Over the years, my wife loved. I used to hunt DIY all the time. She loved when I go hunting because she knew who would come back. She just
Yeah,
knew,
that's a
better than any shrink or Prozac or whatever. She knew who would come
absolutely
back. And she was right
great
all the
thought.
time. She was right 100% of the time. So she says, yeah, hunting is cheap. It's better than
So,
you go to
so one
see
of
the
the things,
shrink.
Bruce, one of the things you should ask your guests in the future is give me a good new excuse for hunting to give to the wife.
That's
In my
funny.
case, my wife has started to come, but man, a really good one is, I could either go to the shrink, it's going to cost us $150 an hour, or go to the woods for the afternoon on Saturday.
Yeah. And I had a good friend of my wife's family, and Lorraine Houston. She was a good shot. She up with she hunted birds, and she had a good dog. But she told my Kathy before we remarried, she said, Kathy, you're gonna have no problem with Bruce. And Kathy goes, well, what's up with that? Because if he's hunting, one, he's not chasing. Two, he's not in the bar. He's not, forget the computers, not reading Playboy or whatever, paper thing. He says he's engaged in something that's going to keep him so much trouble, out of so much trouble. She said it's worth every single dime. And I'll never forget, Lorraine for saying that, because Kathy didn't come
Yeah.
from a hunting family. And she just kind of, okay. And she really loved Lorraine. I mean, Lorraine was a super lady, but she told her that. And, tongue in cheek, really not. She was stating fact. She said,
Hmm.
that will keep Bruce out of a lot of trouble. Now I get into trouble enough. I mean, but having said that, that was Kathy and I have been married 47 years, so that was 50 years ago. She shared that information. So there's a lady that mentored into my life. Something about the
Hmm.
hunting environment and help. My wife also.
Yeah. that'll be a funny experiment you can run over the next few years as you do your podcast. Is come up with the most ingenious excuses we've found as a species.
That making a great ebook or a great
It
YouTube
would
type
be.
of thing.
It would be. It
Because
would
then
be.
at the end of it, I would ask, on YouTube, I'd say, okay, here's my, contact Bruce Hutchin at whitetailrendezvous@gmail.com if you got a better one, and then it
There you
hopefully,
go.
if it ever went viral, then I'd have to hire you to figure it out
Yeah.
for me to make it
So
work.
Bruce, we were at a Ducks Unlimited banquet a couple years ago, and I've always have owned businesses and started businesses, and I have this business idea I'll run by you. It's on this topic. Your listeners will get a kick out of this. So I call it Wife CRM. The CRM is the customer relationship management platform. It's what salespeople use to remember to follow up with you, things like that. So Wife CRM, what you would do is you would put your hunting trips or your fishing trips or your anniversary or whatever into your calendar, all the ones that you wanted to take. And then the CRM would work backwards to remind you to send the flowers, to schedule the massage, to, take the kids to daycare, to plan a date night, like all the things that a guy could be doing to get more time in the woods by taking better care of their spouse. This app would remind you to do in advance. And we've laughed and laughed and laughed about the idea of Wife CRM. And then once we're done laughing, we're kind of like, well, actually, that might work. So I hope someday
Well,
somebody builds that.
and it would, because you could tailor make it, and for hunters only, call it for hunters only,
Yeah.
whatever. And who do we use? We use Salesforce. I forget the CRM we used to use, but that doesn't matter. But to help a guy really get on his game and it blow his wife away, if all of a sudden,
Right.
Mother's Day, it's there. Birthdays, it's there. Anniversaries, it's there. Kids' birthdays, it's there. And then Johnny's, games or Sarah's games or recitals or whatever, it doesn't matter, but you don't miss it.
Right.
And then she thinks you're paying attention. Well, you are paying attention.
Yeah. So the downside of this idea has always been, well, what if she finds out you're using the app? You'd have to have like this whole PR strategy for, well, I really didn't know to send you flowers for our anniversary. It's just, I remembered to put it in this app to send it to you. And so we started to run this concept by women, and they always start with, well, I want my husband to care enough to remember to do that. And then we're like, well, does he? And they're like, well, no. And so I've always said, well, would you rather have him do it, or would you rather have him remember to do it? And they're like, well, I'd rather have him do it. Yeah, I really like that app idea. That's a good idea.
Well, listen,
We're a
we've
little
had,
off topic now, but
yeah, we're having a very eclectic discussion. So, what are your plans for this fall? Are you hunting Nebraska or Iowa, Kansas, or what's going on?
yeah, so we've got a couple trips back to South Dakota planned. I don't have any really exciting ones this year. I'll hunt around here a bunch. Take the family deer hunting during the rifle season. We'll sit a few times to shoot one with a bow, I hope. Waterfowl hunting in, maybe shoot a turkey. I got a lot of hunting stocked up here in the next couple of months. So unfortunately, last year we shot we went and shot an elk, and that kind of took the budget for hunting trips out for a little bit of time here. But I think next year we'll jump back on the bucket list and see if we can't get a good one planned. But this year's just a couple pheasant hunts back home, and otherwise a lot of stuff around here.
That's great. Well, there is, halfway decent to really good hunting, around within, a couple hundred miles of where you live. There's no question about that.
Oh man, southeast Nebraska is a great place to shoot a deer. I mean, the deer are plentiful, and there's big deer here. So may or may not have one in mind, actually.
No, did that deer in the corner come out of Nebraska? Was that a Nebraska deer?
Yeah, he's a Nebraska deer. I didn't shoot him, unfortunately. Here, I'll show you him. He's a big guy.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's a beautiful deer.
Old deer.
And then
too.
we have he's old. We kind of have this collection going here. This is a cool story, Bruce. Can you see this deer?
Yep.
So this deer, don't mind the Nerf guns. That's kind of a startup thing. But this deer and this deer were found locked together. Can you see that?
Yep.
So they were locked like that. So you can kind of see that. This is our back scratcher. I don't know if you can see him or not, but he's kind of an odd duck. These two were found locked together like that, dead. And crazy story, but we had tried to set, just messing around with them, seeing if they'd come apart very easily, and nobody really was ever able to wiggle them and get them apart. One day I was cleaning our conference table, and that always sat locked together on our conference table. And lo and behold, I picked it up just ever so slightly to dust underneath it, and it came apart. So stupid. But those are two big deer, and they were found dead locked together. So that was a neat display piece for a long time. But not anymore. Now they're just a dead deer.
Yeah, they're just hanging out. Bones at the table.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Well,
I'm
gonna wrap this up. We've been at it for a little bit here. And Eric, thank you so much for taking your time. And how far off the interstate? How far off Interstate 80 are you?
We are, it must be 5 or 6 miles. Not far. If you've ever coming through, stop by and see us. The Husker football stadium is about 8 blocks from where we're at. So if you've ever been in Lincoln and you can kind of visualize downtown Lincoln by the football stadium, we're just about 8 blocks south.
Okay, where all the trendy restaurants are and the bars and kind of your loft district, if you will.
Yeah, there's a cool area in Lincoln called the Haymarket District. We're not actually in that district. That's where all the trendy, cool stuff is. We're kind of south and east of that a little ways. But yeah, we always welcome people to stop by. And if you're coming through, you better show up.
Well, I will. I just think I was running my itinerary, and I'll be coming through there on the 29th, which is a Sunday. So you guys are going to be closed.
Well, I'm sure we'll be working, but I don't think anybody will be here. On your way back, come through and show us all your Wisconsin deer.
Well, I'll be posting them to my, social media and stuff, and it'll only be one Wisconsin deer. And, if he shows up, it'll be a nice deer.
Yeah. Well, good luck.
All right. Thanks so much, Eric.
All right, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Bye. We're all in for a treat on this show of Whitetail Rendezvous. Ryan Broshear joins us from Nashville, and he's an independent recording artist. And Billboard Magazine says he's doing one heck of a job. And he's got some interesting takes on what it takes to be a country and western singer. But more important than that, he's got a whitetail heritage tradition from his grandfather and his dad that lives with him today. And he always looks forward to going back to Indiana or Ohio and catching up with his family, spending a few days and sitting around and telling stories and sitting in a stand and chasing whitetails. Enjoy the show, folks.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.